There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
I would like to welcome to my channel another of my Goodreads friends. The term Goodreads friend is kind of a strange term when we don't know each other, but we're getting to know each other right now in a chat. Welcome to my channel, Mikiko.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, so great to have you. And you live in London, but not that London. You live in the Canadian London, Ontario.
I do. Yes.
Another fellow Canuck, and that's in southwestern Ontario, right?
Yes.
Yeah, great. And I saw that you were reading, I actually thought it was essays or something, and then you told me that it was poetry, so I didn't scan the synopsis very well, but regardless, It sounds like a very interesting book. It's called Vantage by Taneum Bambrick, an American poet, female, by the way. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the premise of this work of poetry? It's kind of an unusual premise.
It is. Bambrick is the only female on a garbage crew of 6 people. It's the rest of her coworkers are men. And so she ends up talking a lot about her experiences working with this garbage crew. Her poems, at least the ones that I've read, so I'm only into about page 17. And
so let me stop you right there, because I should have said that at the beginning. For this series of bite-sized book chats, I am interested in having people come on after they've recently finished a book, but I am equally interested in having readers come on when they're partway into a book to give their interim impression. I think those kind of conversations are also interesting, valid, and Mikiko might change her mind when she's finished the book, but I just think that we're always wondering what everybody else is reading, and we want to know how is it so far. So this is one of those how is it so far conversations. So Mikiko, please continue.
Thank you. It's a collection of poetry. It's prose poetry. She's writing in free verse, and I'm definitely not well versed in poetry at all, but from what I understand, it's about her experiences working on this garbage crew and working with a team of only men. And she dives into different conversations. So far, what I have noticed is that she's talking a lot about the dead animals that she's seeing and that, are coming to her, for example, deer in the dam and just this buildup of carcasses, for example, and, the ways in which she doesn't necessarily view the animals as waste, but she sees them as byproducts of something else. So she's able to look at them and think, this is a dead deer, but there's still meat on it. There are still antlers, there's hide, you could still be using the animal, and it's not waste, right? This would be somebody else's food and shelter, clothing. And so the way that she views animals, which is not as waste, is quite unique. And I think that she feels a lot of sympathy towards what she's seeing in terms of the death of animals and the kind of destruction and just how waste is perceived. She's obviously writing from the perspective of a female, but it's just interesting that her views contrast so strongly with her male counterparts. And I think that's really interesting.
That sounds fascinating. Would you describe part of her focus or part of this poetic project as being an environmentalist?
I think what she is looking at is the kind of attempt to tame nature, definitely, and sort of how that's failed and how that actually it's destructive. She's looking, as I listened to an interview, she does want to look at the consequences of viewing that reservoir as this luxury housing project or a space for recreation and families to be at, when in reality it's wild. It's not meant to be tamed, and I think she views it as quite a negative thing, actually.
Interesting. Now, did you say that the garbage crew was working around the reservoirs of 2 huge dams?
Yes.
And that's somewhere along the Columbia River. We don't know exactly where, but the Columbia River is your geographical identifier, people.
Yes. I'm sure I could have found it exactly where, but that's as much as you get, at least through the poetry and the synopsis.
And then would you say that she's also poetically preoccupied by issues of gender?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So she is definitely looking at hypermasculinity in the working class. I think she is contrasting femininity with masculinity and that hypermasculinity, and also maybe the way that she's viewed, by the men on her team. She does quite frequently, at least so far, mention initiation into this crew, and it's really interesting. It's quite. I don't want to say it's violent necessarily, but it is quite grotesque. At one point, one of her crew members throws a used condom at her, and it's just a little bit, it's gross, it's waste, right? And they are throwing their waste at her as this sort of initiation, which is quite horrific, to be honest. And
there is a poem on the publisher's website. I'll put a link in the show notes, and I read it just minutes ago, and it talks about the used condom, and the term for it is snakeskin.
Yes.
And that poem also talks about the decaying animal carcasses.
Yes.
And so it's a grotesque poem, but I thought it was really powerful. I don't think we'll read it here, but I will put a link in the show notes, and people can get a real sense of what she's up to by checking that poem out. So overall, I'm not sure if the word enjoy is the best one, but are you impressed by it so far?
I am, in terms of the content and the subject matter. I think it's quite stark. It is kind of horrifying when you listen to the way that she's talking about how the men are viewing and handling the animals versus, her own kind of shock. I think she is slightly horrified by the way that, the men treat the animal carcasses. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the form or the structure. I studied literature in university, and so my training, or at least my educational background, is in more classical forms of poetry. I grew up with, of course, Shakespeare's sonnets and Blake and Wordsworth, and so a lot more rigid form and structure and poetic devices, which she doesn't really employ a lot of, to be honest. So it's very interesting to me to read contemporary poetry, since it's not something I'm very comfortable with reading, but it's good, and it's not obtuse. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's very accessible.
Mikiko has given me permission. I'm going to link her Goodreads, and she has a blog. I'm going to link that. So if you are curious to see how she feels by the end of the book, you know where to go look. Thank you so much. I hope that you will come back again and again.
Thank you. That would be wonderful. Cheers.
Hey, I would like to welcome to my channel Nancy, who I follow on Instagram, but I didn't really know why. And now I've found out, after I contacted her to come on my Bite-Sized Book Chats series, that she's actually a subscriber of mine. Nancy, welcome to my channel.
Thank you, Sean. Glad to be here. Excited to talk with you.
Lovely to meet you on Zoom for the first time. And you are in the Boston area.
Yes.
And you've taught me how to say Massachusetts. Thank you. How did I do?
Great. It's a Native American word, so good for you.
Yeah. I think I always used to know how to say it, but I kind of lost it. So you're a great teacher. And we are going to talk about a Günter Grass book, The Box, Tales from the Darkroom, and it was translated from the German by Krishna Winston. Tell us about it.
Well, The Box is a fictionalized memoir of Günter Grass. He wrote several memoirs, and this was the last, I believe, or second to last before he passed away. He wrote it when he was 81. The device that he uses is, he has 8 children. In real life, he has 8 children. In the story, he changes their names. He gets them together and they sit around a table and reminisce, and that's the format for the book. There is some magical realism involved. Specifically the box itself, which is a box camera. The author writes about himself through the children. He has 2 very good friends that were about a decade older than him, that were photographers. The husband was tragically killed, and that left the wife on her own, and the author felt sort of an obligation to her, so he hired her to follow him around quite often and take photographs of what he was doing in his family. And so she's the photographer that uses the box. It's a box camera, similar to this one.
Wow, okay.
The reason that I chose the book initially, because it had a box camera on the cover and because I collect them.
Wow.
Yeah, I have a few. I don't have the specific model, but so the reminiscences are from the children through the eyes of the box camera. And where the magical realism comes in is that the camera, when she photographs them, shows not only what's in the scene, but other aspects of the future or the past. One example might be she took some photographs of a bombed out building and it showed the apartments, how they were before the bombs hit. She photographs the children in various stages of their life, and it gives sort of a hint to what their future will be. Now, the author's writing about his children and they're in the future. So the range of the ages when they're reminiscing, because it was published in 2015, I believe. So the ages of the children are like mid-teens through their 50s. He had 8 kids and he had 3 different women. Some of the children were raised apart. So, they're unreliable narrators. They get back together and they're reminiscing, and it's very difficult to tell who's talking because in theory they're sitting around a table and they're interrupting one another and they're arguing about details. And, most of the stories revolve around Marie, the photographer, and her magical box, and whether there was a lot of speculation whether the photographs were real, whether she used some sort of synthetic darkroom techniques to, montage things together. And then the circumstances of the photographs are just so bizarre that eventually all the kids believe that the camera's magical.
And are those photographs actually in the book, some of them?
No, because
they're described.
Well, yeah, they're described. One instance, they adopt a little doggy and she takes a picture of the dog. And then when she develops the film in the darkroom, it shows his adventures all over town when all she did was do a portrait of him like on the front step.
This part of the novel is based on the truth. So this friend / assistant did have a box camera.
She did have a box camera, and the book was dedicated to her, I believe. And the magic to the camera is attributed to the fact that a bomb hit the photo darkroom establishment. Everything else was destroyed, and it was the only item that survived. And then they thought that it had magical properties.
Are those photographs accessible, for example, online? So if you're reading the book and you want to look at some of the pictures, you can look them up?
No, I haven't been able to find any of her photographs. But he was working on a book called Dog Years, and I think it was about the transitional period in Germany. And so he really did have her take photographs that he could use as inspiration for his writing.
And you talked about how it was difficult to know who was speaking, and a couple other things that sounded like they might be. Were they a problem for you? Did this book work for you? Did you like it?
Well, once I got used to the fact that I wasn't really going to know who was speaking, I was okay with that aspect of it. I found the real life parts of the story more interesting than the magical parts. So in that respect, it didn't really work for me that way. But it's an entry point to Günter Grass, his most famous novel, The Tin Drum, I've always intended to read. And that's substantially more of a book than this is.
The door stopper.
And I think he wrote it in his 80s, and he was trying to some extent repair his credibility, his reputation. It was revealed in the mid 2000s that he was in the SS, and that was something that he had hid, and it made him seem like a hypocrite to a lot of people. And so this book, it's reminisces about his children and their life growing up. There are parts of it where he's speaking through the children. It's very clearly his voice, like when he's speaking about how the critics reviewed his books and how unfair they were to him and things like that. Like, would your child choose that aspect of your life to speak about? I don't know, but this book didn't really get a whole lot of press. It's kind of, I guess it's sort of a fluff piece that could be easily dismissed. And when you research Günter Grass, most of his other books are, much more important or much more discussed. So it
sounds like your feelings or your review is a bit mixed. Did it make you want to read more by him, or did it put you off of him a bit?
Well, I think that I would read more. He did another memoir that was more straightforward prior to this one called Peeling the Onion, and I am interested in finding that one. I watched the Tin Drum movie, which is, spectacular and bizarre. So that it has always been on my TBR that I intend to read it, but
someday. Yeah, I haven't read a word the man wrote. I would probably start with the Tin Drum. But the stuff that you found out about him from this memoir, this thinly veiled autobiographical novel, makes me more interested to read something that he wrote. So I'm very grateful to you for coming on my Bite-Sized Book Chats series and telling us all about it. And I definitely want you to come back.
Well, thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you, Nancy. I would like to welcome a Instagrammer that I follow on Instagram, if you didn't already figure that out. And her Instagram name is sapphicly bookish, and that's the name we're going to use for her for this little chat about a novel that she recently read. Welcome to my channel, Sapphicly Bookish.
Thank you, Sean. It's a delight to be here. Thank you very much.
Sapphicly Bookish is so wonderful that she agreed to do this morning, even though her voice is a bit hoarse. So thank you very much.
It is indeed.
And boys and girls watching at home, that is not a fake Zoom background, because Sapphicly Bookish is joining us from where?
Phoenix, Arizona.
That is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to be discussing the novel The Tunnel by Ernesto Sabato, translated from the Spanish by Margaret Sayers Peden. And I have been interested in Sabato for a long time. He's an Argentinian novelist, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've been interested in him for a long time, not knowing a thing about him. And I would like to start this conversation by asking a provocative question. What is an Instagrammer who goes by the moniker Sapphicly Bookish reading a book about murderously macho male obsessive murderous love? Sell me on it.
Excellent question. It's because it is something so far outside of my experience. One of the reasons why I read translated fiction and all types of literature is to understand perspectives that I will never have. And as ugly and terrible as it is for a macho murderous man who is narcissistic, loves himself, hits women, follows them, stalks them, is an utterly terrible person. As a lesbian, that's not really in my romantic life, but it is in the lives of my gay friends, my bisexual friends, my straight friends. It's in their world. It's a danger they face. And although there are a lot of books that tell it from their experience, but it gets much scarier when it's told from the perpetrator's point of view, because he sees nothing wrong with any of this. And we're all familiar with books written in the first person, and, they kind of have their shtick. But what this did very well is that it was less of a narrative and more that you were seeing his thoughts go by on ticker tape. It wasn't a Ulysses kind of thing. I haven't read that, but I'm familiar enough with it. It was more, as someone who is familiar with psychology, I've studied psychology at the graduate level, it was really like having someone sit with you in an office, almost like you're their therapist, and they're just confessing everything, their crime, how it happened, all the lead up to it. And they're so honest with you. And as great as you are, as thankful as you are for their honesty, it's actually horrifying. And it gave me a view.
Did you have to have a shower afterwards?
It was so gross. I didn't, even though it's a short book, I think it's like 140 pages. I read it as an ebook. I had to take it in small bits. I'm already a slow reader, right? But I was taking this at maybe 10 to 12 pages at a time. Because, at the beginning, he tells you the very first or second paragraph of the opening page, I murdered so-and-so. I, Juan Pablo Castel, murdered, da, da, da. And it's kind of like, okay, you already know the ending. That's fine. But you don't. Because when he does get to the ending, and from the very beginning there's going to be a murder scene, it's not spoiling for everyone. But when the murder does happen, it is one of the coldest things in literature I've ever encountered. it's so cold and so brutal. And you, as the reader, you understand where the woman's coming from as she's being murdered. But he immediately starts to think of how people think of him, the papers that will talk about him. Will his art sell more? It doesn't matter that this woman is bleeding on the floor, right? He just is thinking about himself. So it's very cold, and it's probably an incredible turn off for the book. I get that. It's dark. But I would encourage you to read it because they're, in a way, characters that you can pick out, and then in your own personal life, when you've got dating or whatever, kind of think, this reminds me of someone that I read about. They weren't that great. So I would encourage people to read it just as kind of a way to become familiar with the people that are out there that you don't want to be with, that you don't want to date. It's a better warning coming from this book than coming from me. And I know it's a weird way to reduce violence against women by saying, read this book of an awful man, the first person, talking about how he eventually kills a woman. But that's in a way what literature is for, is to give us these perspectives. In a way, I think of literature as thought experiments. And that's what this is. This is a thought experiment, a very elaborate, sad, dark one. The writing, oh my goodness, the writing, it's very interesting because you're in his head. There's not much in terms of exposition. He doesn't really care about that. It's just having this woman in his mind, fast reading about her all the time, being incredibly jealous over the dumbest things, following her everywhere, trying to think where she'll be next, getting mad, hitting her, being jealous. She's married. There's some confusion as to whether she's always been unfaithful and what the things that are going on. And that's really not much of a spoiler, by the way, because I can't spoil the experience for the people who read it, because the book is the experience. It's not the story. Again, it's told at the beginning. It's going to happen.
Well, holy smokes, sapphicly bookish. So I hope you'll
Thank you
on my channel again and again.
Absolutely, thank you.
And I want you to school me in some fabulous lesbian lit.
Will do. Thank you.
It's a date. Thank you so much. I would like to welcome a very special guest, somebody who I've been following. He's my Goodreads friend, but we've never talked. I think we've liked each other's posts, but we've just met on Zoom about 3 minutes ago. He has excellent taste in reading because we often overlap in our tastes. I would like to welcome Bill from Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome, Bill.
Hi.
It's very exciting to put a face to a name. And Bill has recently read this British novel, Love and Other Thought Experiments by Sophie Ward. I have it, as you can see, but I have never read it. Bill, you quite liked it.
Yeah, he did. He did, because the premise from the start, the book talks about an ant that goes into like a woman's head. And I was like, that is very interesting. Because at first I thought it was going to be wild, crazy, sort of fast-paced. And then it slowed down. You realize it's very, very slow and very meditative. And it tackles a lot of huge questions about relationships and family, motherhood, just the mere existence and like alternate lives and all that in a very, very unique way. Something that I've come to realize I like reading this year. This is a great surprise. Yeah.
It's quite a philosophical novel.
Yes, it is. For such a short book, it tackles a lot of questions. And there are also like other characters that appear. We primarily follow a family, two queer women want to adopt or get a child, start a family. And their relationship and their mothers, one of them mother's relationship, and like the perspective of, there's so many cool perspectives. I don't want to spoil the book, but it's a surprise. There's a surprise in the book, a very unique perspective that really, really, really really made me small, really made a very unique, I don't know how to explain it, but the ant plays such a big role. Like the ant
enters the woman's head how? Through the eye.
Through the eye, yeah. It's very creepy. And at first, we get the story from the partner's perspective, not the one with the ant getting in the eye. The other one, who's a scientist, and she believes that her partner is just being delusional and seeking attention, I think, in a way. But we soon discover that this ant is actually, there's something much deeper than that. It grows into something so huge.
Now, I am interested in this novel, which is why I bought it. But
Yes.
the more I hear, what you're telling me now makes me more interested in it. But when I heard that it was really philosophical, I don't like philosophy.
You should give it a try. I think you should still give it a try. Yeah.
When I listen to
Just
you
from
talk
the premise
about it,
alone.
sounds like it's something that I might like.
Yeah.
Booktuber Eric Carl Anderson did a long interview with the author, Sophie Ward.
Oh, I have not watched it. I'm going to watch it.
Link. I'll send you the link, and I'll put a link in the show notes because she's fabulous. I only watched the first few minutes of the interview, and then I thought, okay, I want to read the book, and then I'll come back. And you said, Bill, that you like this kind of book. So what other books did this remind you of?
I don't think I'm very fast. Philosophy can sometimes go over my head, or sometimes I kind of get it, like angles. So like this year I read Les Misérables, like for the first time. It took quite a challenge, and it was steeped in philosophy and big questions. And then sci-fi, was this Ted Chiang, the one who wrote Exhalation. Beautiful. I've read both collections this year, and I cannot believe that I had gone this long without reading it. So when this book came from that angle, I was like, yes, this is definitely a genre or a space I want to explore. Like more books that dive deeper into this topic of philosophy. Yeah.
I think I remember you reviewing is it Ted Chiang?
Yeah, Exhalation and the stories of your
the
stories of your life. Yeah, the one that the movie Arrival was based on. Yeah.
And I remember being a little surprised. I thought, oh, Bill, like this, because I don't read sci-fi or anything like that.
Oh,
so
me too. I rarely do.
Okay, well, maybe I'll follow you. I'll try.
Yeah.
Love and Other Thought Experiments first, and if that goes well, I will tippy-toe into some literary sci-fi.
Yeah, because this one was fabulous. I think you'll really love this one. Especially it aligns with your taste because it doesn't veer too far into philosophy. It still brings you back to like themes that are relatable, like relationships, motherhood, and like just existence, going by daily lives. It's so quiet, such a quiet and powerful book.
Is it a series of linked stories, or is it?
Yeah, I think so. In a way, very loosely linked. Yeah, because we follow the perspective of the son who will eventually come to their lives, and then we follow like the mom, one of the mothers of the queer women, and the partners. Both of them will switch, so you don't know where the story will take you, and that's such a joy because I don't like predicting too. As much as I like slow stories and like plotless books, I like that idea of interlinked stories.
Well, the more I hear you talk about it, the more I will try it, even sooner than I thought. So, Bill, you're a wonderful guest from a very interesting part of the world. So I'm hoping that you will come back often.
Yes, I hope so. Please invite me because it's so nice to talk about books, you know. I don't have a lot of people in real life who read about.
You'll be hearing from me real soon. Thank you so much.